Hello everyone and welcome back to a short reviews video for August 2022. This is a monthly segment where I mention those albums and EPs that I didn't really feel I had that many things to talk about, so all of those are cramped up in this segment over here. Those releases usually range from 6+ to 4-, and some of them I do recommend them since they might be more to your liking. So with all that being said, you know the drill, let's just jump straight into the video. Now we have another brand new release from Grimm this year, and I find MAGNOLIA'S Dream to not be one of the most compelling releases of Grimm in recent years. I like some of the more catchy directions with some of the power noise segments where we basically get some approaches that are sort of reminiscent of like a sound you might find from Dream Crusher, with tracks going into some more of like techno directions and actually having some legitimately catchy moments, but for the most part it's a pretty standard release for what it does, and I don't believe that it has some of its more intriguing ideas in comparison to other new releases that I've heard, which I find to be pretty satisfying for the most part. But despite some pretty decent tracks here and there, this is not one of my standouts out of recent material from Grimm. So we've waited after all of those years just to get this. Bobby Shmurda's new EP is pretty disappointing, and I've seen absolutely no one talk about this because it's pretty understandable. There is really nothing that much special about this release. Basically, Bobby Shmurda's new release plays it really safe. It's pretty standard stuff, which back in the day it would be pretty enjoyable, but times have changed. The trap sound as we know it has evolved over the years. This release over here offers absolutely nothing new. There is not even anything remotely special about this EP. For the most part the tracks feel sort of unfinished, they're really short, and the production and the mixing is not really that good. Some of the tracks over here really don't sound good. And while we have some tracks that are actually enjoyable and are kind of bangers, having Bobby Shmurda's appeal with his early works, that's pretty much all about it. For the most part we're still talking about a pretty average release that is really forgettable, and yeah, after all of those years I find this return to be kinda disappointing. Once again, I find this new release of Megan Thee Stallion to not be that bad. I actually really enjoy Megan Thee Stallion's flow, attitude, delivery. I truly find her to be a really solid female rapper out of this generation, and some of the tracks over here are really catchy, quite energetic, and have an aggressive tone which I find to be pretty enjoyable, but we're still talking about a pretty bloated album over here, and unfortunately the thing is that a portion of this album just feels like filler. In my opinion, this album could have been a bit shorter, keeping some of the highlights and making this a much more compelling experience, but still for what it stands on its own, I still find this to be a pretty solid pop, rap and trap album that in my opinion could have been even better. I see the potential and I truly believe that Megan Thee Stallion can manage to make a really solid full-length project in the future. I end up finding myself somewhat enjoying this new direction of trap music where we have those sounds and aesthetics that are categorized like rage and plug. I truly see the appeal from sounds like this from time to time. However, the issue I have with full-length albums out of this genre with the inclusion of no stylist is that they would have 2 or 3 pretty solid ideas, and that the rest of the album is just a failed and desperate attempt to make the exact same hit song, which for me it never really lands. It ends up making a huge portion of the album sound like filler, and this is the issue that I have with no stylist at the end of the day. I find that there are like 2 or 3 tracks that I would say that I really enjoy, that I find to be really good, but the rest of the album is just repeating the same formula over and over again. It becomes really repetitive, one-dimensional, predictable, and we're talking about another pretty bloated album. So while I see the appeal of those genres, at this point I believe they only apply to particular songs, with the albums feeling like a collection of those same songs, trying to find at least something that would get the clicks and hit the algorithm. So while I see the potential of rage and plug creating something quite significant in the era of trap music, I still haven't found an album that would satisfy me from start to finish. Danger Mouse and Black Thought is a pretty solid collaboration project which contains some pretty cool sampling and instrumentals going into jazz rap and conscious hip hop, with the lyricism and the delivery going into this more abstract hip hop style. I believe that this is an album where you can find more enjoyment out of it. I still enjoy the album, I still believe that there are some pretty solid elements out of it, but not something that would necessarily make me return that much to it. I once again find that with this new SRSQ album, there could have been a potential for something really great. I believe that her voice is really beautiful, the ethereal atmosphere and the dream pop directions make for a pretty solid combination of sounds and aesthetics. However, I once again didn't really find anything that much impressive out of this album. I feel that many of the tracks drag on for so long. I don't really find there was that much of a reason for some of those tracks to go for like 5 and 6 minutes long, because they don't really seem to provide all that much into this runtime. They're really slow in their pacing and they end up becoming quite repetitive. While I like some of the parts where it seems like it becomes progressively more intense and that the tracks build up with atmosphere as they go on, for the most part I believe that they sound really bland. And yeah, once again, I believe that there was potential for this album to sound greater, but the ideas and the executions leave a lot to be desired in my opinion. The Soft Pink Truth returns with a house EP that I found to be extremely underwhelming. I believe that this teases for a full-length album, but if the full-length album is gonna sound like this, then I'm not really that much interested. I believe that the ideas over here feel really poorly executed. There is really nothing that much interesting with the ideas, the beats, the compositions. So yeah, I feel that in terms of a Soft Pink Truth release, it sounds kinda lazy and uninteresting. I was honestly expecting much more out of it, and I don't really believe that I got anything that much significant out of this release. This is a project that I discovered completely out of nowhere, and I believe that it started off pretty strong, as the first track was this really dark, twisted and aggressive electronic track with really nice dark atmosphere to it and also a really nice use of a dark step beat. I was honestly pretty impressed with how the release started, so it was kinda disappointing that the rest of the EP didn't really hold up to those standards. It ended up in just a really short period of time to feel kinda repetitive and one-dimensional, not really extending that much of the ideas it provided at first. I was hoping for a little bit of a more development, but the rest of the release was kinda forgettable in my opinion. I still find this to be a pretty interesting release and I strongly recommend it, as it's definitely a really solid and highly aggressive electronic release with some really nice dark atmospheres to it. But I certainly believe that this EP had the potential for much more. Considering how strong it started, I was hoping that it would keep up the same energy with the rest of the songs. Cry Sugar is an album that feels to have a lot of cool ideas, but it never extends to a point where I would say that there is anything about this album that I would find impressive, something that would really stand out, something that I would consider a highlight. It is a pretty lengthy album, it has many songs, and I believe that there could have been some of its material cut off, as some of the tracks sort of feel like filler at the end of the day. And while I like that for the most part we get those seamless transitions from one song to the next, making it sounding like one continuous thing, I don't necessarily believe it works that much in its favor. You get quite a few moments over here that are just like 30-second interludes that provide almost nothing more to the experience as a whole thing. It is a pretty enjoyable electronic release, but it never gets to a point where I would say that there is anything that much exceptional about it. There is not really a standout over here, it's just an album that sounds okay from start to finish. I feel that this is kind of the same case with this brand new EP of Goji. While I like some of the directions that this one takes with some more subtle sounds and approaches of electronic music, especially future garage, I didn't really find anything that I would say was particularly exceptional. It is just a pretty enjoyable, soothing release with some catchy beats and some nice melodies here and there, but I never really found something that I would say was like a highlight or something that would stand out. I just find this to be a pretty cool release from start to finish, but that's mostly just about it. I'd say that Will of the People is, for me at least, the best thing Muse have released for almost a decade, which that doesn't really say that much because from the past decade Muse's sound has gone really downhill. So even with me saying that this is somewhat a bit better compared to the latest Muse releases, it's not really that much of a compliment because we're still not talking about that much of a good release. When it comes to the lyrics, it seems that Muse have missed the mark a long time ago, but musically those directions of alternative metal and even glam rock at some phases were somewhat enjoyable in my opinion. I actually believe that some of the material provided over here musically are a bit catchy, and while you can say that some of the synths and the vocals and the overall sound can be a bit obnoxious, I can agree with that, it never really bothered me that much. I still managed to find enjoyment out of the ideas provided over here. It is a kinda catchy album, but obviously do not expect something that much special. It's still just Muse trying to go into a different sound, which still doesn't manage to work. It just happens in my opinion to work just slightly a bit better compared to some of the latest releases they've done, which, like I said, it doesn't really say all that much. This is still another pretty mediocre album with some really weak ideas to it. Unfortunately, I cannot really see the hype with a new J.I.D album. For me, J.I.D has a great and unique delivery. The rapping and the bars over here are spot on. I cannot deny that. But when it comes to the instrumentals and the beats, I can't really say I found something that much special with this release, like at all. It sounds good, the production is fine, but other than that the approach seems just pretty average. I believe that we've heard similar stuff like this many other times in the past, and I don't really find this release to manage to extend or creating something that much different or special. For me it mostly feels like a serviceable release, and it's fine, it sounds nice, the deliveries are nice. I really can't say that I have a negative about this release, but I also don't have something strongly positive at least. I just find this to be a pretty okay hip-hop release from a guy that certainly has a unique flow and delivery, and with this album he delivers in this regard, but I don't know, yeah, for me that's pretty much about it. I just find it to be an okay album. I don't really believe that there's something that much exceptional, that much special about it. I personally cannot get the huge hype surrounding the Forever story. And that's all that I have for the short reviews of August 2022. What's your opinion on any of those albums and EPs? Like them, dislike them, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.